So today we learned about the wonderful Liquify filter that's available to us in programs like Photoshop and Photopea. Now, standardly, Liquify is used usually to retouch photographs, to make people's lips look larger, slim images, thicken images, changed size and proportion of features. But it's also used in other ways, and we're going to practice two ways of using the Liquify filter today. Now, for your check for understanding, you have two options. You can choose the happy face or the slim, thick image. Both of them are using Liquify, but in slightly different ways. Now, the key to doing this well is to make things subtle and not overly retouch. You don't want it to be an obvious thing. So first thing you're going to do is open up this file and open up your Check for Understanding group. You see option 1 and option 2. Now, the instructions are kind of set down here as well, but first things first is you need a copy of your layer. The reason for that is that this is a destructive thing. So if you don't copy it, you're not going to be able to see like a before and after, and you won't have a backup in case you overdo it. So if you're going to do the happy face, you're just going to make a copy. You can hit Control or Command J. You should have a copy here. You're going to work off the copy. Next thing you want to do is go to Filter and Liquify. For the happy face, I gave you some settings here just to help you out. The brush should be about 20 to 35, no more than that. The density should be about 50, and the rate can be at 100. This is how intense your brush is going to be. Now I'm going to zoom out. And my focus on this is just to make her look from a very serious face to a slight smirk. And to do that, I'm just going to pull the sides of her lips up, turn, so it looks like she's smirking. So I like to zoom in close to make sure I'm doing this well. I'm just going to click and drag. Okay? What you don't want to do is this, right? That's a super obvious retouch. You want short burst of movement, click and pull, and small subtle changes. So I'm just going to pull this upward just a little. It looks a little more like a smirk. And what I'm basically doing with this Liquify filter is I'm pushing and pulling pixels. And it's kind of connecting from what's already there and trying to read in what direction I'm pulling it in. Now there's a whole bunch of tools here on the left that I can alter with. Most of the time you're going to use this one here, the smudge, because it allows you to literally smudge pixels around. But blow is usually used to make things larger. So if you wanted to purse her lips, you can do that. If you wanted to shrink her lips, you could do the opposite, which is shrink, okay? But we're gonna stick with just making her look like she's smirking. She's a little happier than she looked in the original. So I'm gonna do this, and you're gonna speed through this part, but you're gonna take your time and kind of pull these pixels slowly until it looks like she's smiling a little. When I'm happy, I'm gonna hit OK, and now this is why we want two copies, because you're gonna get to really see your influence on this. So if I hide that copy, I can see that I took her from a very serious face to a happy face. And this is where you'd give us your first check-in. Now, if you choose the second image, slim thick, which I think is the more challenging of the two, but it really requires good finesse, so it's great practice, you're going to start off with the same thing. You're going to make a copy, so you have two of the versions, so you can see a nice before and after. You're going to go to Filter Liquify, but this time we're going to make her hips and her thighs a little wider, because why not? They're always slimming out images in magazines. We're going to do the opposite. So some of the settings you might want to consider is a slightly larger brush, because we're working with larger areas of her body. The density 50, and I want the rate to be a little lower, so it's not as intense and I have more control, because I'm doing a lot. Now I recommend starting at her hips, because I think it's just a little easier. So I'm going to zoom in and work from her hips here. Using the same tool, I'm kind of just slowly pulling her hips outward just a little. I'm starting with her fabric on her pants. And you notice everything I do is I click and hold down, but I'm not pulling like this, because then you get those weird bumps, which is an obvious tell of retouching. I'm going to be subtle. I'm going to fast forward through this part again. This one might take a few more minutes, but it requires a lot of finesse. It's a great way of knowing how comfortable you are with this. You're going to see that I did the left side and the right side of her legs just to make it a little more even. I think if I pulled out one side of her leg and not the other, it would have looked super fake. So I went all around the legs. I didn't touch her upper body, just from hips downward. When I'm happy, I'm going to press OK. And again, we have a before and after. So if I show it and hide it, she just looks slightly curvier, nothing too intense, and nothing so obvious. So if you choose number 2, please make a screenshot of that and put it in your progress slides. Now you're going to save this as a JPEG when you're done and hide this. And we're going to move to the main activity. And we talked about Salvador Dali and how he had this melting clock kind of vibe. We're going to do something very similar. So here's what you must include in this scene. You have to have some sort of background image. You can choose a vector, meaning like a line-based drawing in that sense, or a raster, a photograph. You just want to bring it into this file by going to File, Open in Place, and then deciding what kind of images you want in it. Now, I've provided some things for you. You don't have to use them. So I've given you like a spring theme, a retro, a summer, and some clocks. You don't have to use these. I'm going to show you how you can take something, and I'm going to show you what I did. So I'm going to pop over to my document. First thing I did is I found like a retro style image. I didn't like the color, so I added a hue and saturation just to tone it down. And I liked it because it's a place where I can throw things on and it'll look like it's melting off the sofa or the TV stand or something like that. I decided to use the retro images that I provided. Now this is how you kind of take those images and use them yourself. The first thing you're going to need to do once you've decided, if you're using the ones I gave you, you're going to need this. Depending on the image you upload, you might have a white background or not. Just keep that in mind, that you're going to have to select something out. So I'm going to activate the layer. I'll use my rectangular marquee tool and I'll pick something I want to look like it's melted. I'm going to take the radio. I'm just going to make a selection. I'm going to copy and paste it. What that's going to do is I'm going to hide this now. It's going to put the radio on its own layer. I'm going to name it because I'm going to have a lot of stuff on here and I don't want to get confused. So I have the radio. Problem is I have this white block behind it. I'm going to use the magic wand because it's white. That's why it's easier. I'm going to just click on the white, hit delete. Now I should just have the radio. I'm going to deselect by itself. Next thing I want to do is decide where I want this clock to be. Maybe I want the clock to be right on this stand. And now I'm going to do the same liquify filter, only this time I'm not worrying about subtlety. I actually want an extreme change. I want it to look like the clock is melting off the table. So I'm going to think about the angle my table is in. It's like this. So I'm going to have something kind of bump out. Same idea, have my layer activated, go to filter, liquify, and play around with the settings here to make my clock look like it's melting. Once I'm happy, press OK. Now, right now, I think it looks a little too straight, so I'm going to distort it. And I'll show you how to do that really quickly. You can go to Edit, Transform, and hit Distort or Perspective. And what this will do is if you pull it, you see how you can kind of change the angle it's in? I just want it to look like it's a little bit more pulled sideways. So I'm holding down Alt and Command to even get it more in an angle. And if I don't like this, I can redo. Like let's say I want more of a distortion, I can go right back to Liquify. It'll pick up right where I left off. Now again, just keep in mind that we're asking for at least 4 images being brought into some sort of scene that appear to be melted with the Liquify filter. Now if you want to challenge yourself, bring in more images and really melt them into the scene, or create your own with some paint brushes or maybe a pen tool. Now what we're looking for is that the melted images really appear to interact or belong in your scene. So it shouldn't just be smacked down on top of the scene. Think about how it would fold over a table or a chair or whatever your background includes. Now we're going to ask for some check-ins here as well, and then when you're done, you're going to export this as a JPEG. Good luck.